hook?
Okay guys, the hook. The basic movement for a hook is as soon as the match starts, the opponents are going to turn inside, thus creating a hook, right? To pin the guy, you're going to take your hand and stick it into your shirt pocket. Come back up. The match starts with straight wrist. Right away they turn in a hook. The opponent puts his hand into his shirt pocket. And that's how he wins. That's how to correctly use a hook move in arm wrestling.
All right. Press?
A press. Now the most important thing about the press is the setup. You have to set up so that your shoulder is higher than your hand. Once again, as soon as the match starts, you will turn into a hook, and like a hammer to a nail, you will take your shoulders to hammer, your hand is a nail straight down to the table. Let's look at again the other side. Kind of keep your shoulder back so we can see. On the ready go, they turn into a hook. His shoulder is higher than his hand, using a hammer motion straight down to the pad. Press move arm wrestling. To successfully perform a top roll move, it's a leverage move using back pressure to separate your opponent's hand from his own shoulder. Straight back, attacking the hands and forearms all the way down to the pad. All right, let's watch it from this side. Nice and tall, attacking the fingertips and wrist, separating the hand from the shoulder, just like so. The first thing you want to do is be extremely balanced at the table. So you want your feet underneath your hips, hips underneath your shoulders, right, at all times. Another thing that you want to make sure is that without even grabbing your opponent's hand, step aside a little bit right there. Without even having your opponent's hand on you, you want to make sure that you personally have the ability to manipulate this starting position to a pinning position. So let's just make sure that Mike can make that transition. A lot of times you'll see if his elbow's down, it'll block him from even moving down. He can't even pin himself. So foundation's balance, right? Hips underneath your feet, shoulders underneath your hips. The most important thing is to make sure that there is a winning motion, and there's a winning motion perfect. The foundations of arm wrestling, we're going to work on his hand and his wrist the most. Some of the hand exercises that we'll do, a lot of pull-up holds. Pull-up holds, he'll cup, bend his wrist, resist pressure up, and resist pressure out, right? Making sure that he has amazing stability in his hand and wrist in the starting position. Right? The next thing is, where is he going to move this starting position when the match starts? There's two ways that he can move it. He can move it with hammer power, back pressure, whether it is a laying on his tricep and rising pressure, or he stands up, separates his elbow, and then drags his elbow back. Both of these things will force the starting position to manipulate back towards his position, thus taking the opponent's hand away from their shoulder, separating them a little bit, having a little more leverage on your side. The last movement is side pressure, right? At some point you have to go sideways. He can do that in a top roll with the wrist bent, and all it is his ability to pin the guy going that way. Side pressure can be in a hook position. It can be in a tricep press position. All it is the ability to take a turn towards the pin pad. Okay guys, in arm wrestling, when the opponents are up there, at any point, they slip grip, ready, go, the strap will be applied. Relax guys, just close your fingers for a second. Around both opponents' wrist, and then up through to the back of their hand. The thing's all wrong. No big deal. And then it tightens down to the back. There are techniques for the straps. A lot of times, guys want to focus on trying to get open up, just to try to let Bard go higher so they can see. To try to get the webbing, open up, to just try to get the webbing a little higher than their opponent, thus creating a ton amount of leverage at the top of this grip. For the most part, the strap is there just to keep them together, right? No matter what happens from here on out, we're going to have a winner this way or that way without another slipper. So tournaments are set up in a various amount of ways. The most prevalent arm wrestling format is a double elimination tournament, which means that the opponents come up there, they can lose a match in two different ways, right? One, they can get pinned, right? You can get pinned either by touching the power, touching the pad, or you can have what's called a parallel pin, which will be the referee looks down, and as soon as any part of the arm wrestler's hand or wrist drops below the two parallel lines, it will be considered a parallel pin and will be a win for the puller. They can also lose by fouling, right? There's multiple ways you can foul. The first way that you can foul is there's 3 points of contact that always need to be met on an arm wrestling table. The first is at least one toe has to be touching the floor. You'll see guys take their foot and put it up on top of the opponent's peg. They'll stack it up against their peg. Sometimes they'll put both feet underneath of the table. Both feet. Yes, sir, both feet. They can stand any way they want. The only requirement for their feet is that at least one toe is always touching the floor. The next point of contact is the offhand that is not competing must always have contact with the peg. Okay, at any time it slips off, it will be a foul. The third point of contact, and the hardest one to keep in contact, is the elbows. The elbows have to stay in a 7-inch square. They cannot come up and have any daylight underneath. They also are not allowed to fall off the sides, back, sides, or front. Another way you can foul is that any part of your body touches you or your opponent's hand or wrist. And then another way is in a set grip, if there are any infractions where you're not paying attention to the referee, he can call setup fouls for bowed wrist, for high knuckles.